Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everyone. This is Sir RunsAlot Gaming. It's been about 2 years, but I decided to upload the newest version of me doing the Zuk fight on normal mode on my iPhone 15. This is my inventory that I use. I'm going to start with the Conjurer's Raising Amulet, which just gives some extra damage to my conjured spirits. I have the Blessed Flask and the Ancient Elven Ritual Shard, which give some extra prayer points. I have the Enhanced Excalibur, which gives me some extra passive healing. I then jump down to the Occultist's Ring and the Death Warden Gloves. I use these two specifically for Zuk himself. I have the Power Burst of Vitality, just in case. I have the Ancient Renewal Flask, or the Adrenaline Renewal Flask for some extra adrenaline. The Elder Overload Salve, of course, with the Weapon Poison +++. Everything in the Zuk fight is poisonable except for Zuk himself. I have Super Restore for the Zuk fight. I have the Stamina Potion. For the hard mode version of this is the same preset that I use for that. I do use the Super Ceradomin Brew Flask. I know that's a bit extra money, but I think it's worth it for the extra heals. The Blue Blubber is pretty standard. The Rocktail and the Sailfish are more or less emergency food. But yeah, I'm going to go next to my inventory, or to my equipment. I do use the Supreme Invigorate Aura. I find this one really helpful on Necromancy specifically, because it gives you an extra 10% back for your ultimates, which lets you use Death Skulls a lot more often. And Death Skulls is your best ability for Necromancy, in case you didn't know. I have the Win book, which is just good for AoE. I have the Tackle Zo, which is good for everything except for Zuk himself. I have the Death Warden stuff. I do have the tier 95 weapons for Necromancy, which are very, very helpful. I have an Essence Finale with the tier 90 Death Grasp special attack in it. I have Cinderbane Gloves because, again, everything in the Zuk fight is poisonable except for Zuk himself. I have done the Flawless Hard Mode Zuk run, so I have the Igneous Cal Zuk. It's not necessary, it just helps a whole lot, again, with especially the Death Skulls. So I am maxed. I have 120 Necro, which just adds a little bit of extra damage. You can look all that data up yourself on your own time, but yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into this fight. My action bar here I use for the majority of the fight, and then the revo bar down there you can see as well. Feel free to copy anything. I do change my action bar when I get to Zuk himself, but you can see that a little bit later on. So here we go, we're starting the fight. I go ahead and I summon everything. I extend the life. I make sure I get my healing back with the Excalibur, and I just go ahead and use the Ancient Elven Ritual Shard as well, so their cooldowns are on the same timer. I always make sure to put on my Bone Shield. It's hard to tell sometimes on mobile if it's on or off because there's a bit of a lag, so I hit it there twice. And here we go. I got my first things first for this wave. I jump in with Soul Split. You really don't need the protection prayers for the melee guys, especially because I feel like, at least if you're using the tank armor, which is what I'm using, the 290 tank armor, they really don't hit too hard for you, and you can Soul Split pretty much everything. For the majority of my time on RuneScape, I've been using magic, so I think I'm also just a bit used to being able to tank melee hits a bit more, so I think I've convinced myself they don't do as much damage. But for the second wave here, you really just want to make sure you get rid of these Rangers. They do a bit more damage than these melee guys, so I try to get rid of them quickly. If you're watching closely, you'll notice that I'm trying to use the Death Skulls ability pretty much as much as possible. I don't use my soul ability pretty often, at least early on. I try to save it to always use it when it has 5 stacks. If you don't have the 295s, I guess it's easier because it's just to wait for the 3 stacks. But I try to wait for the 5 stacks every time before I use it, and I always try to use it with Threads of Fate because I want to get as much AoE out of the way as possible. So on this third wave here, these big boys do a little bit more damage, but especially with Soul Split on, I find that you really don't have to worry much about them. I get my Death Skulls off again, and what I'm really just trying to do is get through these first couple waves quickly because they really aren't too difficult. I really don't even use abilities much. If you look down at my Revo bar, the only things on my Revo bar are the Conjured abilities and then a bunch of the basic abilities. So all I do is I revo the basics. This is true for all the combat styles, and I do thresholds and ultimates manually by myself. For this first Igneous wave, you have to stun the meleeer. So what I do is I stun him as quickly as I can, and then what I do is I make sure I give the invoke death on him so that he goes down pretty quickly. I move on to the next guy, I make sure I stun him, I invoke death, and here is where I use a whole bunch of my soul stacks. It's not necessary, but I find if you're trying to save a little bit of health, it's pretty worth it. Same thing, stun the meleeer, make sure you get invoke death on so that he goes down quicker. And then I run over to Zuk. I don't worry about anybody else. I make sure I have soul split on every time I do this. I throw a vulnerability bomb to make sure that this 50k goes pretty smoothly. I think this time around, if I remember correctly, I'm recording the voiceover afterwards. I think this time it gets a little bit close to maybe not making it. I move my screen around just so I can see the bar at the top to see if I have enough time left over. I try not to use abilities here because I want to make sure I have Threads of Fate, which you can see is coming off cooldown at the perfect time. So you click on one of those little melee dudes, you hit Threads of Fate, and then you use your soul ability there. And then the Threads of Fate lasts a little bit longer, so you can still use either the 290 spec, or you can use the Finger of Death, something like that to finish them off. I find that that's actually probably the easier Igneous wave with Necromancy. With Magic, it's a little bit different, so Necromancy makes this a bit easier. I do throw on the protect from or deflect range prayer here because these range dudes do a bit more damage than I'm comfortable with. I just try to make sure that the melee dudes aren't hitting me at the same time as the rangers. And you can see the safe spot in this corner here lets Jad sit back towards the opening of the fight arena. And I'm just going to let him sit over there and make sure I deal with everybody else first, and then I'm going to walk over to Jad and deal with him. If you don't know, with Jad, don't use Soul Split because he will destroy you. So I just pray my magic here. If he's up on his hind legs, you pray magic. If he bangs on the ground real quickly, you pray range, and that's really all that it takes to deal with Jad. I make sure I invoke death on him to get him done quicker because I'm trying to get this running a bit quicker than I did in my previous video. But yeah, I go ahead and I surge over to the safe spot area that I like to camp, and this is the range round, and this one's a bit easier than the next one just because you don't have to deal with the big range boys as much as you do in the other one. What you'll see me do a lot in this video is I have my bone shield on, which I find it makes so much easier content so much easier because it doesn't take away your DPS like it would if you were wearing a shield for magic. So I'm pretty much always using reflect, at least in the Zuk fight, and I really think it takes a lot less damage. It helps me take a lot less damage, I should say. And I also do have the new 4th Conjurer who takes some damage for you as well. I don't know how much he's worth it, but I'll take as much extra damage reduction as I can. So you see me here just making sure to clear out these Rangers. This wave is a bit trickier, so what I will often do is I will go to my abilities book and I'll hit Devotion. And every time you get a kill off of the person you're using Devotion against, it extends it. So if I'm running low on health here, I'll do that, but I do always have Reflect on pretty much always here. And sometimes what I'll also do to make this fight a little bit easier, you see me using Threads of Fate there with the Soul ability because it is super good at clearing these waves. You just gotta make sure that they're close enough that Threads of Fate will get as many as it can. But what I was gonna say was sometimes because these big range boys hit pretty hard, I'll do a Resonance here and see if I can get a bit of a heal off of it. Not necessary for this specific run, but it is helpful to do. Pretty much invoke death as often as you feel comfortable. It does cost some necromancy rooms, but I find that it makes these Zuk fights so much easier and so much quicker. I'm getting tons of text during this run. Sorry about that. For this next Igneous wave, you need to use a Threshold ability. On the big boy rangers, you can kind of tell they're just a little bit taller, a little bit bulkier. So I use my Threshold. I use Finger of Death for all 3 of these guys. And again, same thing as the first Igneous wave. I make sure that I'm always using Invoke Death on them because it just makes it go a little bit quicker. I zoom over towards the 3rd guy over here. I have to wait because my Finger of Death is on cooldown, but I do make sure to get my Invoke Death down. Finger of Death him. And here we go. He gets down pretty quickly after that, and then I make my way over to Zuk himself. If you remember me saying this earlier, I make sure I always have close to 100% adrenaline, and I'm on soul split when I'm attacking Zuk, because this is the best way to get my health back. I do end up doing this run flawlessly and with no food, and the reason that I'm able to do that is because I take advantage of soul split on Zuk here. Every now and then I'm going to use my Ancient Elven Ritual Shard to heal up the prayer points. I'm also going to use my Enhanced Excalibur to get some health back. And that's just, and same for this guy here. I use Soul Split on him as well, because if I use my full soul ability there, I get a whole bunch of healing back, so that you can see that actually put me all the way back up to full. I got him down quicker than I would with magic or range because I use Invoke Death. And this is an important part of the fight, because what I do is I sit in this little corner here, and I usually don't click on anybody else, because if you can see there, it took me out of the corner. So I just wait here. I make sure I pray the right thing for Jad. It just takes a second for Jad to spawn, I've noticed. So I sit in this little corner. He can't attack me with melee here, and that's the most important thing with Jad. You just want to make sure you're not in melee distance and praying the right thing. This is such a good opportunity to use your Threads of Fate or your Death Skulls, either one. Make sure you always invoke Death on Jad, because it makes it so much quicker to deal with him. And yeah, so I've noticed that if I stay far enough from the second Jad on this specific wave, I don't have to deal with him. So I make sure I deal with all of the other mages around me. I do have to step up to get the little bird guy, the annoying prayer reducing bird dude. But I just make sure that my camera has Jad in view so that I can pray the right thing at the right time. Invoke Death. I try to get this done quickly, so I throw a Vuln Bomb at him. And my main goal is to get Jad out of the way before this melee guy gets there, so that I can soul split off of the melee guy. And there you go. That's wave 11 done. And that's the majority of the Zuk fight already. Necromancy really is just the best ability right now. So jumping into wave 12, I know that it starts with these two big boy rangers, so I try to clear them as quickly as I can. It's obviously not... It's not really possible to deal with both of them at the same time unless you really skirt around the arena. So I just kind of try to invoke death on both of them and get them out of the way quickly. What I've found is that these next two waves, waves 13 or waves 12 and 13, are the waves that I have the most amount of damage taken. I think it's because of the bleeds that these big boy rangers cause. If you didn't know, you can see on my buff bar there, the little fire symbol that's counting down 15, 14, 13. That is because these big boy rangers do bleeds, and you can freedom them, and which I do at some point in this video to make sure that they stop. But if you still have one of those big boy mage guys up, they're going to reinstitute the bleed. So I usually try to do it at the end of each round once all those guys are down. This next one is the same thing basically. I know it starts with a super big ranger boy right there, so I try to get him down quickly because they do a whole bunch of damage if they stay in the same place for a long period of time. So I try to get him down quickly, and then I go ahead and I use a Death Skulls here because it's super good AoE. It does a whole bunch of damage, and because of my relics, which I've never mentioned, but I have the relic that saves you 10% adrenaline, and I also have the aura that saves me 10% more adrenaline. Basically it costs 30 adrenaline to use Death Skulls with all of the different buffs that I have going, and that's pretty good. It's pretty hard to beat that. So I use Death Skulls as much as I can, unless there's only like one or two guys left. I'll still try to use it for this big ranger boy because I know he just does so much damage. And what we're going to do now is we're going to walk over to our last guy here. He's our big mage boy. I'm not going to use freedom until he goes down, and then I freedom his bleed. And what I do is I walk over to where I know the first Igneous Major is going to be, so I don't have to worry about getting inside his shield. I invoke death on him like I do all of the other Igneous waves. And what I'm doing is I'm moving the camera around so that it's easier for me to get where I need to go on these waves. And what you need to do if you're on mobile for this is you need to do a long hold press and then click walk here, because if you just tap in the general direction of these guys, it's going to tap on them to attack them, but it's not going to walk where they are. And for these, for this third Igneous wave, you have to be inside the shield of the Majors to actually get rid of their damage reduction mechanic. So I have to hold walk here and then go under their shield manually. I find that's one of the more difficult things to do. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. You just need to make sure you don't click on him, and you hold click and then make sure you click walk here so that you can get inside his shield. And here we go. We got our third chance to get some soul split heals off of Zuk. This one is very, very important because I'm trying to manage my adrenaline to the point where I end this specific part with full adrenaline, because the way that you want to deal with the third Igneous wave here with these little monster dudes hitting you is I pull up my ability book and I make sure I tap the ability there. I forget what it's called off the top of my head, but basically it takes all of the damage away from you. And then I want to hit my resonance at the last second when it says there's 1 second left in that previous ability to make sure that I get that last hit off, because I don't have turtling on the Necromancy shield, which I would have on the previous ones. Like on a magic shield, I would have turtling on that to make it last longer. But anyway, back to the 3 Jad wave. I go back to this corner down here in the southeast. I deal with the first Jad in the middle, and it safe spots the other 2. And then I make sure I walk on the right side of the fire pillar because it keeps that left Jad in that position. It doesn't move him. I'm invoking death on all 3 of these Jads because it just gets them done a lot quicker. I already said this previously, but it's important to remember you don't want to be in melee range. So I'm staying far back from Jad, far back enough that he never tries to melee me. And I can tell you have a few, like a second or 2 to switch your prayers when he goes up and down. And they're the 3 Jads, just like that. Now we're on to Haar Aken. He can respawn on the left or the right, so I wait, and then I zoom over to whichever side he ends up on. This is where I'm trying to kill him as quick as possible. So I Vuln Bomb, I use an Adrenaline Pot, I use the Invoke Death, I use Death Skulls. I'm using everything I can to get him down as quickly as possible. With the Invoke Death, all I need to do is get him down to 30,000 health and he dies quickly, which is why this is super important to use, especially for this one. This saves you so much time. You're supposed to be avoiding these fireballs that hit the ground, and I accidentally walked into it this time. But it's really simple. As soon as your phone screen shakes, you just walk 2 spaces to the left or the right, north or south, something like that. That one, I just accidentally tapped, and I ended up walking into the adrenaline thing. Right before Zuk, it's important to renew everything, so I make sure I use my Ancient Elven Ritual Shard, I use my Enhanced Excalibur. His very first mechanic, you're going to want to Freedom, so I make sure I always hit Freedom pretty much as soon as he does that. And we go into the fight. We use Deflect from melee because he hits very, very hard. And for this next one, what I do is I surge, and as soon as I hit the surge button, I tap on the ground where I'm standing so that it walks back. It takes a little bit of practice, but you surge and then tap where you're standing, and you don't have to do anything else. Sometimes it'll surge and I'll miss the tap and I'll have to manually walk over. For this third one that he just did where he hits the ground, you basically just want to avoid the ground breaking points. And for this one, you want to make sure you hit your resonance. So if you didn't know, every 3 auto attacks, Zuk does one of his little special attacks. You're going to want to deflect melee for all of his auto attacks. And as soon as he's done auto attacking, right before pizza, I switch to soul split. I zoom out as far as I can. I click a little bit to the left, and then I click on the melee dude and I zoom over there and I make sure that I stun him as quickly as I can. So I stun him, I make sure I use Invoke Death, and I try to get him down as quickly as I can. I know that these guys always respond to the northwest of where Zuk is. So I make sure Zuk is to my north, to the right in front of me, and then I make sure I'm clicking to that northwest spot. So I reorient my camera, I have Zuk in front of me, and then I walk to the northwest because I know that's always where those guys are going to spawn. For this major, it's the same thing that I told you guys earlier in this video. You make sure you stand in the shield, but to do that on mobile, you have to hold click and hit walk here. So yeah, and then right when we are about to attack Zuk again, I'm going to one cycle him in this video, but the reason I'm able to do that is because I get as close to 100% adrenaline as I can before he does his big bomb thing, and I pause him. So I have 100% adrenaline. I make sure that I use my ultimate that makes everything stronger. I forget what it's called right now, but I use my ultimate. I make sure I use Death Skulls. I freedom this bleed right here, and I'm basically waiting for Death Skulls to come available again, and I hit it as soon as I can. Hit Death Skulls again. I'm just trying to do as much DPS as I can in this moment. This is the technique right here where I have to hit surge and then walk back just takes a little bit of practice to do, and I'm hitting death skulls again because it's my best ability right now. I make sure that I invoke death on Zuk because I want him to die at 30,000 health. So I invoke death, and I also make sure he's always boom bombed. And there you go. That is the Zuk fight on my iPhone 15 with some tier 90 necro gear. I go here to see if I got any drops, which I did not, which was kind of sad. But I always take off the bone shield, and I always make sure to turn off my my god book just to save some money in the long run. I always collect the tuckles here, and that's it, guys. So you get about 5 mil per normal mode kill. That's a 17-minute and 5-second normal mode kill. It's my 119th normal mode kill. And that's all there is. I know I talked pretty quickly, but I wanted to make sure that I covered as much as I possibly could. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I'll be adding some more videos to my channel soon. Thanks.